Hey there, I'm Matt Sargent with ABC Acres out in Hamilton, Montana. We're here today though to talk about why beef, why grass-fed beef, how it fits into our models of production, and why they're such a crucial element to maintaining the health and ecology of our farm. We recently had an enlightening conversation with a young gentleman on Instagram who brought up some really valid points. However, he wasn't considering our operational context. When you're designing a permaculture system, one of the key things is to design your context. That includes taking a look at your climate as well as your needs for production. So, a quick bit about our climate. Here in Hamilton, Montana, we're in growing zone 4. We have 123 frost-free days. No, 123, yeah, and 100 freeze-free days. So some of those days, no, I strike that, reverse it. We have some days where there's frost, but we're not getting killing freezes. The point of the story, we have a very short growing season. We also average 12.65 inches of rain a year. That's almost 13 inches, and the majority of that is between December and early June. Most of it comes in the form of this white stuff that's on the ground called snow. So we're also on the 46th parallel, bordering the 47th. We're pretty far north, which brings us to some of our needs and desires for production. One, we wanted to not only feed Tim's family, as well as my family, provide for the workers of the farm, but we also wanted to provide high value, nutritionally dense food for our community. And we wanted to do so in a way that not only benefited the community, but benefited the ecosystem surrounding us. So with all that in mind, we're going to go around the farm, take a look at some of the other systems we've developed, and discuss how beef tie into it and how these highland cattle play such an integral role fulfilling our production requirements within our climatic context. So we're taking a quick stop in our greenhouse. We've got some spinach, some lettuce, some kale, lettuce. We're gearing up for spring production. As I mentioned, we live in a fairly harsh climate. Not a lot of precip, really cold winters, long winters, short growing season. We do a fairly intense no-dig, raised bed production as far as annual fruits and vegetables go. But even crops like kale, which can overwinter in some places, they're going to die in most winters here. Sometimes we can get lucky with grow covering, letting them express themselves to be a biennial. But that's just part of our context. It is tough to grow a crop here. That said, grass grows really easily. We do provide a lot of nutritional demands for ourselves as well as our community through the gardens. However, to scale it up and really produce and maximize our 80 acres would kind of require tilling. We don't want to till for a myriad of reasons. One, it's just we don't want to lose topsoil. We want to be improving our topsoil. But the other reason we don't want to be heavy tillers is every time you till, you're destroying life. Everything from very small, microscopic bacteria and fungi to small mammals, destroying their habitat, destroying habitat for ground nesting birds, etc. And I've heard all sorts of different numbers, but a lot of animals die in the tillage process. There are a lot of farms across the world that are doing really cool stuff with very low tilling once or twice and then getting into a habit of using cover crops, rolling them, and then no-till seeding a crop in behind them or transplanting right in behind them. As I mentioned, we basically have a 100-day growing season. That doesn't give us enough time to grow a cover crop, let it terminate it, and get a subsequent crop with any serious nutritional benefit out of it. Yes, we could winter kill cover crops and do summer crops, but then we would still have areas of land that weren't in production because we'd have to have half in cover crops one season, winter kill, crop it the next year, and that wouldn't be of huge benefit to the local ecosystem. So that's why we don't go that route. The other reason I wanted to stop in the greenhouse and show all of our babies is, as I mentioned, it's a very harsh, unforgiving climate. Once it gets warm and the water turns off. Almost everything we grow in our garden, with the exception of some seeds that have to be direct seeded, like carrots, is started in this greenhouse. So every plant that we plant on this farm, I have an intimate connection with. We value all life on the farm. We know how hard it is to establish healthy, vigorous life here. One of the things that we were criticized on is how we can have a relationship with one of our cattle and terminate its life, and that we should be eating plants. Well, a lot of studies have shown that plants can communicate. Just because they don't have eyes doesn't mean they're not sentient beings. Throughout this whole video, I know I'm going to make references to stuff, and I'm not putting citations in this video. You either believe me or you don't. And if you're curious, there's this thing called Google. You can find almost all the information that I'm talking about there, and you can confirm for yourself whether or not it's true. But we know that plants communicate via mycorrhizal networks. Mycorrhizae are essentially the root system of fungi, and they form bonds with, or mycorrhizae are an advanced form of mycelia, which would be the root system of fungi. But plants form relationships with that fungi, and if an aphid comes in and starts munching on this kale, it's going to communicate via that mycorrhizal network underground to all the other plants saying, hey, I'm being attacked by aphids, batten up the hatches, start your defenses, which I think is really cool. They have an ability, like, as humans, we tend to think we're really cool when we communicate. Oh, we have a very specific verbal language, but all animals and plants and fungi communicate. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's not happening. So we highly value all life on the farm. It saddens us just as much to know that this kale is going to have a short lifespan as it does for us to bring a steer in on processing day. So I just finished talking about all the reasons that we didn't want to rely heavily on tillage or cultivation in our production models, which really requires us to utilize and make the most out of perennial species. For that reason, we planted our tree belts. We've got 8 off of the top of my head, maybe probably more like 9. We've planted a lot of other trees in other areas, and we're going to be planting way more next year and the years after. Just finished a conversation with Tim. He says that he's going to be planting trees until the day he dies. I'm right there with him, hopefully. So, and that's because with a perennial food-bearing system, you're able to produce a crop, perform great ecological benefits without disturbing the soil and actually improving the soil of that area. So our tree belts utilize the concept of the 7 layers of a food forest, even though there's 8. So that'd be your upper canopy, your lower canopy, your shrubs, your herbaceous plants, your ground cover, your root crops, vines, and fungi. Well, one of the things about operating around here is our ground cover is naturally a grassland. We've got a lot of grasses and clovers, legumes that make up the ground cover. Another part that helps define our context is that Montana is a bioregion, especially western Montana and the Bitterroot, that has got a very heavy fire-based ecology. There's fires every summer. As I mentioned, it's pretty dry here and it's hot in the summer months. So fires are a reality of everyday life in the summers around here. And unless you are actively managing your grasslands, either mowing or grazing, you're putting yourself at risk for fires, because even if a fire is up in the mountains, if a spark hits tall, dry, dormant grass, it can travel really fast. All right, so in order to establish our context, we've covered a lot about our climate and our desire to benefit the local ecology, provide habitat, We also haven't really discussed much about our desire to provide quality, nutrient-dense foods for not only the workers of the farm operators, but also our greater local community. Part of that is, yes, in our garden we can grow a lot of legumes, a lot of beans, we can grow a lot of protein. What we seriously lack the ability to grow in this climate, in this northern region, is lipids. A lot of the fattier foods that are easily assimilated, such as avocado, they just don't grow in Montana. Weird, huh? So when you look at all that and you consider the premise of function stacking within permaculture, i.e. having one thing that does multiple things to your benefit, one part of your operation that really provides 3 or more benefits, that's where beef comes in. We're able to control our grasslands in a holistic way, and part of that holistic way encourages habitat for ground nesting birds, turkeys. We stock our cattle herd to the size where we still have plenty of forage for the local wild ruminants, the elk, the deer. So it's beneficial to that. The cattle are fertilizing the ground, the land through our holistic rotational grazing. We're actually growing better grass every year and creating more and more diverse and healthy habitat, as well as eliminating the threat of fire. Also, they provide a high quality source of protein and lipids. And as you know, the further north you go, the greater the need for lipids is. But whether or not you want to believe it, all people in all climates need some level of lipids. It's how your brain functions. So I hope this gave you some thought. And in the future, I mean, maybe I'm interneting wrong, who knows? But I don't go to someone else's page and say you're doing this wrong. I prefer to operate under a manner of, this is what we're doing, this is why we do it, and, you know, hope to inspire others. So that's our context. That's part of why we do what we do. As always, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. And until next time, happy growing.